So good morning everybody. In this presentation I'll start with an overview of our project which involves the development of a regional water balance model for the southeast of South Australia. I'm also going to describe some of the challenges associated with simulating shallow water tables in the southeast and how we've overcome those challenges. The motivation for the project is gaps in our understanding of the regional water balance for the southeast, recharge distribution and groundwater interactions with wetlands. There's a number of wetlands in the southeast that are Ramsar listed, so it's important to understand the processes associated with those. Ultimately, the project will support water allocation planning for the Lower Limestone Coast, prescribed Wells area. While the Lower Limestone Coast is the area of interest, the study area incorporates the whole flow system and therefore runs over the border and into Victoria. The blue arrows here are showing the flow lines for the system. The project has involved 3 separate tasks, and each of these will be presented on within this session by Russell, Rebecca and Sebastian. So the rest of my talk will be on task 1, which is the regional groundwater flow model. The objectives of the model are listed here. They are to summarise and update the available data, of which there's a lot, assess the regional water balance, identify data and conceptual gaps, and provide a framework for small-scale models that will be built in the future. So the groundwater model is very large. It covers approximately 42,000 square kilometres. 26,000 square kilometres of that is active cells. Consequently, it's got a very coarse grid resolution of 1 kilometre by kilometre. We're representing 3 layers in the model: the unconfined aquifer and aquitard and the underlying confined aquifer. As you can see, it's not a simple model to build, not a simple area to build a groundwater model of. There's lots of challenges involved, including a large network of man-made drains, wetlands, potential for inter-aquifer leakage, pumping from the unconfined and the confined aquifers, and an extensive coastal boundary. But by far the biggest challenge has been recharge and ET. As you'll see, recharge and ET are dominant water balance components in the southeast, and they're dependent on depth to water table. There's a high potential for uncertainty when we're modelling recharge and ET in the southeast, and we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to reduce and quantify that uncertainty. Unsaturated zone models have been built to model recharge. This has been done using both Leacham and waves. They have different strengths. Leacham is good at modelling irrigation, waves at plant water use. By comparing the outputs of these different models, we're better able to understand the impact of using different modelling packages. My focus specifically has been on the challenges in applying recharge and ET within a regional scale groundwater model. And that's what I'll be talking on now. So this slide shows a water balance that was developed as part of the Southeast Science Review in 2010. Whenever I talk to Cameron Wood about this, he's always quite keen to point out that it's a first pass estimate. Nevertheless, it shows the importance of recharge within the water balance. And here it's about 80% of total inflows to the system. Here, recharge actually means net recharge. So it's rainfall minus evapotranspiration, or ET for short. And while rainfall is quite well constrained by direct measurement, ET isn't. And in the southeast, ET is very large because we have shallow water tables. So this figure here is showing depth to water table in the southeast for 2008. The light blue area indicates where the water table is within 5 metres of the land surface. And as you can see, that's an extensive area, especially in the coastal plain. And because of this, it's very important to accurately represent the ground surface in our groundwater model because it's going to have a large impact on our ET calculations. However, this is really challenging when you're upscaling from a DEM that has 2 metre by 2 metre cells to a groundwater model that has 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre cells. So that is 250,000 DEM cells in each groundwater model cell. And the DEM values vary by around 14 metres within each groundwater model cell, and yet we can only choose one value. So which value do we choose? Perhaps the one that's closest to the centre of the groundwater model, or a mean value. But actually neither of these is really optimal. And yet it's really important to choose correctly because our model ET depends directly on this value. So as this schematic shows, ET is calculated as a function of the distance between the ET surface, which is generally set as land surface, and we use the DEM for that, and an extinction depth, and the position of the water table relative to these two. In order to overcome the uncertainty associated with this issue, we're using a new approach to modelling ET within ModFlow. Here we set the ET surface as the maximum DEM within a groundwater model cell, the extinction depth as the DEM range in a groundwater model cell. And what this means in reality is that our calculated ET is scaled by the area of inundated land within each groundwater model cell. So if the cell is completely inundated, our ET equals the potential ET. If it's half inundated, the ET is half of the potential ET. So this is the way we represent ET in the majority of the model domain. However, in forestry areas, we know that the roots go down deeper, so we've modified the extinction depth to account for that. So the resulting modelled groundwater ET for 2008 is shown here. The areas that are white indicate that there's no groundwater ET. Blue areas, the ET is quite small, and red, it's large. Interestingly, had we used a satellite DEM to do this analysis with a coarser grid resolution of 30 metres, we would have got the figure on the right, and the ET would have been larger by 1,500 gigalitres. So clearly, there's a high potential for uncertainty when we're modelling ET in the southeast. So the next question is, how good are our modelled groundwater ET estimates? We're fortunate in that we have MODIS satellite data from 2000. This is a spatial and temporal data set that can be used for calibrating recharge, and Russell will talk about that later. I've used it to check different modelling approaches. So here MODIS ET is shown on the left, and on the right we have the sum of our modelled groundwater ET, which I showed you, and soil ET, which was calculated using Leacham. Unfortunately, I don't have time today to describe the Leacham modelling in detail, and in any case, John Hudson would be better to do that. But by adding the groundwater ET and the soil ET, we get a total ET, which is comparable to the MODIS data, and we can compare them. So if we look at these two figures, we can see that the total volume of ET is quite comparable, it's quite good, and the spatial variation is not too bad. We get a scaled root mean square error of 24%. But there is some discrepancy in the interdural flat areas, you can see around here, and we're looking into try to improve that. So I'd like to conclude just by highlighting some of the outputs of Task 1. So these are a regional groundwater model which can be used for scenario modelling and for developing water balances. An example output is shown here, so we can provide water balances for any groundwater model component for any date between 1970 to the present. And we've also carefully assessed uncertainties associated with the conceptual model, the choice of recharge modelling, and a range of different input data. Thank you.